I'm trying. Hello. Is it okay for us to just continue? Okay. All right. So what we would like to do is, and maybe this might even help for Dr. Phumzile's session, to see you all a bit better. Where's the camera? Where's the camera? It's over here. Oh, okay. Oh, this is the camera that's showing us. So we'd need to do it like this. Okay. But the camera can be moved, right? So, all right, what I'm thinking is what is leaders discussion, etc. The way that we wanted to do that was as a fishbowl discussion. So if you could all pick up your chairs, and this is Sophia, I don't know in terms of like how things look with the tables, is that very important? Because what we could have are the fellows like in a kind of like a long circle thing with their chairs here. That might be quite nice for her also when she's viewing it. Okay, let's have everybody just line up your chairs like this. I hope it fits. We might need to move something, but let's see. Just like quite tight. It might be tight, but yeah, just the chairs. That might be quite nice for her to view it like that. And this is how we can also have that leaders discussion. And then the camera can come, here. Move something out of the way. Yeah, it might be a bit squishy because remember when we did it with people, it was quite tight. Now it's with chairs. A second circle? Yeah, maybe. Oh, but then you can't see people. Let's try. Oh my gosh, this jumpsuit. Is it a jumpsuit or is it a two-piece? Oh my gosh. Kevin. He said hi. Yeah, totally the hype. Like, I'm sorry. Yeah. You were right. Say you were running. Yeah, they're right. Yeah. They're totally right. All right. Are we kind of fitting? It's okay. Or is there still quite some? It's still safe, yeah. Nah, let them come here. Otherwise, that's like everybody. Okay, there's still space over here a little bit. We didn't want it to be a circle, but because I think we want the camera to be able to see you all. But then it is a bit too squished over there. Just come, you guys can come down here. All right, for the leaders discussion, actually, we need five, can I have 5 volunteers to start? It'll switch off. Let's get 5 more chairs. Sorry, Edwig. We need the fishbowl, right? Yeah. Let's make it a circle now. It comes online. We cannot take our needs. Please volunteer. Right? Leaders are born, not made. Anyway. Thank you, Dad. Conversation. The other one, I'll take it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So we can hear your beautiful voice.
Okay. Okay. So from my perspective, I think that the statement is not accurate. Like, leaders are not born, they are made. I think I would like to come into the conversation focusing on the nature versus nurture conversation, in as much as, yes, we're born with the right genes, right, all of those biological needs we get from our families, but you see that nurture really influences what you become. Because I was watching a TV show about serial killer who was able to continue killing people for a couple of years, especially gay, Latin Americans, blacks, brown and black communities in the US, because from what they explained from the TV show, they only focus on how the parenting mostly affected him. So for me, I think that from that kind of perspective, it's more of a nurture kind of situation. So I feel like they are made, not born.
Can I? I think when we say born, because usually people always tend to assign like like being a leader as being like very talkative, as being very charismatic or expressive, but through time you realize it's really not. So when you say they are born, which means people think in their mind, yeah, he's born to be talkative, but he can talk a lot, be very charismatic, but not really touch people. So I don't think they're actually born, because you can born any way, you can look, anyhow, you can be anyone. But if you got something in you that you develop, it's true that we have different characters, we have different personalities, and some of us prefer to be more discreet, some of us like to share, but still you can be not sharing, but you still can have a good relationship with people and you can just connect with people. So I think it's more about the connection. And I would say it is made, because you can be born really shy, but you can make the choice, to lead your community, to go towards your goal, to push people. So I don't necessarily agree with the fact that like people are born like that. It's just like hobbies. You can be really good painter, okay, you were born with the talent, maybe we can say, but if you don't work on it, if you don't develop it, then it serves nothing. And I think also I read some scientific articles that said that, the most successful people, athletes, like let's say top on their fields, they don't necessarily have that talent, but they put so much energy and work, they work so hard toward their goal, and it's determination that gets them there. It's not necessarily the talent.
For me, I think I'm a little bit in the middle. I believe that leaders can be born in the sense that, when you are growing up in an environment that is conducive for you, you have the opportunities, and your parents and your ancestors have ingrained in you, they have intentions for you as a leader. So that's kind of how I see it. I think you can thrive in that way. But I also agree with you that leaders are made. And in terms of the people that you surround yourself with, even, when you're not a child anymore, can really be indicative of the type of leader that you can be. So for me, I think they can both be born and they can both be made.
I think for me, I agree with you, Ayak. I think that you can be born a leader and you can have certain characteristics that the world deems to be characteristics that are looked for within leaders. I think that leaders are actually, however, made. And like Khadir said, it takes 10,000 hours. From the book, The Outliers, they talk about how it takes 10,000 hours to develop a skill. And I think that if you put effort and you put energy into becoming a leader, you can grow that skill and you can become a leader in whatever aspect you decide to lead in.
Hi, everybody. We're going to have to interrupt you. Thank you for the conversation. I think we're going to be coming back to this. Dr. Phumzile is now online. So please go back to your chair. Just go back right here. Don't move. Stay in the circle. You can just repeat yourself. Yeah. See, the cameraman can move. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead to you, Chris. That's fine. Yeah. All right. While we are just adjusting a few chairs, I would like for Ms. Odette Kabaya, who's the Regional Gender Advisor and Team Leader at UNDP, to give us this introduction of Dr. Phumzile Mlambo.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Dr. Phumzile. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. Can fellows welcome Dr. Phumzile warmly, please? Thank you very much. Really, we are so very happy to have you with us this morning. In the room, we have 38 fellows, the second cohort of the program, the fellowship program, the joint program with the African Union. And they are posted in 28 countries in the world, in Africa, Asia, Europe, and US in New York. So it's really a great honor and a privilege to have you today in this interesting workshop, the leadership workshop. In the room, we have also representatives from the African Union Commission, especially the Directorate of Women, Gender and Youth, led by Madam Prudence Ngwenya, that you might know, I'm sure. And also we have colleagues from the Africa Leadership University based here in Kigali, and colleagues from UNDP. Today, it is really a pleasure to have your experience, your journey, which is really quite interesting. Maybe to briefly introduce you, the fellows, Madam Phumzile, or Dr. Phumzile Mlambo, which was the UN Under-Secretary General of the UN, United Nations, and of course the Executive Director of UN Women at the global level. But before that, she worked with the government institutions, private sector, civil society organizations, and very importantly to note that she was actively involved in the struggle to end apartheid in her country, home country, which is South Africa. For example, she served as Deputy President of South Africa. Deputy President, I hope you heard me. She served as Minister of Minerals and Energy, Deputy Minister in the Department of Trade and Industry. She was a member of Parliament. And yeah, she really, in her capacity, a very interesting experience and profile. She is a founder of the Mlambo Foundation, which support the leadership and education. Of course, a long-time champion of women's rights. She is affiliated with several organizations devoted to education, women's empowerment, and gender equality. She is member of several boards, for example, the Global Partnership and Fund to End Violence Against Children, member of advisory board at Africa Leadership Academy and board of, yes. Thank you. And also a member of advisory board of Africa Leadership Academy and board of trustees at the Mandela Rhodes Foundation. Just to name a few, we'll say that this is really a summary of her profile. She also has completed her PhD on education and technology at the University of Warwick in United Kingdom. So again, my apologies if I missed some updates, Dr. Phumzile, but as I said, this is really a summary of the summary. So without maybe further ado, I will of course leave you to share with us what you have prepared for the fellows. With that, maybe I will hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Okay, okay. No, thank you so much. And I'm sorry that we were initially struggling to connect. And let me thank the organizers of this important session. And I would also like to welcome the young women leaders who are participating in the session and congratulate them for having been chosen to be the leading young women in the year 2022. It's important to have you as the people who will assist in the implementation of the vision that is embodied in Agenda 2063 of the African Union, as well as the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. Both these
Sorry, I'm still not sure about that.
These two overarching agendas have been somehow dealt a very hard blow in the last few years, especially by the pandemic. They have been somewhat derailed, but it's still possible for us to bring them back and to make sure that we achieve most of the objectives. The world, not just Africa, is at a crossroads right now. I look back and I feel this is one of the most difficult times of the world. This is a time where we truly need strong and focused leadership. We need people to be informed, and we need to take whatever information and news to the broader population in our country so that we all are focused in the same direction. The pandemic for women was extraordinarily hard. You probably are aware that globally, 2/3 of the people who lost their jobs were women. And one of the reasons why so many women lost their job is because women are employed at the bottom of the pyramid. Most of the jobs that women do are not covered by labor laws. So it is easy to fire women. It is difficult to rehire women as well. Women also in the hospitality sector, which is a sector that was hardest hit sector, hospitality and tourism, were mostly in casual jobs where they were they did not have medical aid, they did not have pension, they did not have long-term contracts. So again, it was really easy to fire them. We are happy that the economy in many countries are rebounding. Tourism has begun again, but the rehire of women has not risen to the pre-pandemic level as yet. So wherever we are, wherever we live, we still have to be the spokesperson of women in tourism and call for greater engagement of women in the sector. Women also were affected by the pandemic because they lacked the technological skills. Many of the women who were able to sustain their employment during pandemic needed to be digitally literate, and therefore were able to move from their workplace to their homes and continue to work. This has raised for all of us the need to close the gender digital divide. For those of you who may be in the digital space, this is something that is important to pay attention to. As we speak, the digital gender divide continues to increase. And this is causing us a lot of concern because the future is digital. If women are not acquiring these skills, it certainly means that women are going to be left behind. It doesn't matter what field they are in, you need the digital literacy, whether you are in the STEM subjects, whether you are in the arts, whether you are in the languages, etc. The world is at a crossroads in many ways. The world is at a crossroads because, for instance, of the war that we have seen in Ukraine. Even though this is a war that has nothing to do with us in Africa, we have been dragged into it. Many of our countries have depended on the supplies of grains, for instance, that come from Ukraine. And the cut off of the supplies have caused a lot of food insecurity in many countries. For you as young leaders thinking about the future, one of the things you have to be interrogating now is globalization. We are in this situation where there are shortages in supplies of goods in many countries because we are so interdependent. If we receive goods from another part of the world, we are likely to suffer if that supply chain is disrupted like it has been right now. It was disrupted by COVID, it is now being disrupted by this war. So one of the homeworks I am leaving with you as women leaders is really to reflect on how globalization can be made to work for us in Africa without exploiting us. Globalization, when it came in its strength, it was telling us that you can get anything you want just in time. It meant that you could buy goods that you can produce in your own country in a foreign country because that was made cheaper. But the buying of goods in a foreign country meant that you are giving your own capacity as a country to be productive, to be a manufacturer. So the question we have to ask ourselves as people who are taking a step forward to 2063, how do you build productive capacity in your different countries? What education do you need in your countries that will make our young people to be ready to supply for their own country as much as possible and not to be happy about just depending on imports from foreign producers. And of course, the other challenge that we face, which tells us that the world is at a crossroad, a world that requires the engagement of women leadership, is climate change. Climate change is much harder on women and girls. Many foreign countries who are responsible for causing climate change, who are supposed to be responsible for addressing the impact of climate change, are not as forthcoming as we expect them to be. So what we have now is that the countries that are least responsible for contributing towards climate change, those countries, and many of them in Africa, are carrying the brunt of climate change. Climate change is hard on food security. The provision of food in our countries, in families, is an area in which women play a significant role. When there is no food in the household, it is a woman who suffers. Climate change is also, Noah, climate change is also critical in the provision of clean energy. Many countries are experiencing challenges of energy, including my own country, but also mismanagement of the energy resources that we may have. We are experiencing a water shortage because of the climates that we are facing. Many of our countries are at a time when our groundwater is dry, when we have our dams drying up. This suggests that we need many young women to become leaders in the water sector, both in the management of water and in the development of policies. Climate change is also creating the most horrible type of forced migration. People running away from parts of the countries that have been affected by weather, where crops do not grow, where weather is extreme. And those people are finding it difficult to settle in the countries that they are migrating towards. So there's a whole issue of climate change, which I would like to suggest that as young women, you need to be most familiar with, you need to be engaged, and you need to lead it. We have seen young women and girls in particular raising a lot of issues on climate change, but we need to make sure that women across the board are playing a critical role in the leadership in the climate change space. And then your education. With many of these changes that we're seeing in the world today, I would like to argue that the education we received, people of my age group, and yourselves to some extent, is not necessarily the most appropriate education for the future the world is facing. You require to be opened to become lifelong learners, because the future is going to be changing in your hands every day. You need to be open to learning new things all the time. The best person and the best leader you will be the one who is open to learning all the time. So I ask you to see the importance of reimagining education. Recently, as you may know, at the United Nations during the General Assembly, there was a summit on education. And in that summit, many young people called for education to be reimagined. The changes that we're seeing in the world are much faster than the changes we see in education. So we need to find a way of propelling education to change much faster than it has been. And then the importance of intergenerational leadership. We need you as young people to be in the forefront, but we also need you to learn to pick on the skills you need on those behind you. You need to stand on the shoulders of those that are before you so that you cannot repeat the mistakes that they have made, and you do not lose out on whatever they can bring to the table. But at the same time, that you remain the ones that are on top, that are in the leadership, because as younger people, you can see much further than the people who are here. 2063 is your time. You are the ones that will make a difference then. But the difference you need in 2063 has got to begin now. So it's important that in every sector, you look for those changes that need to be made today. Technology is an important game changer in our lives, much more than it has ever been before. We are now in the so-called fourth industrial revolution. We had the first industrial revolution, which was in many ways pushed by steam engines, which made ships run around the world. And these were the steam engines that brought colonization. All of us in the countries that were colonized were victims of that first industrial revolution, which brought about imperialism around the world. The second industrial revolution was driven by electricity. Electricity created large production and manufacturing around the world. It changed the way we worked. In that industrial revolution, the second industrial revolution, just like the first one, we were also victims, especially us women. Women in many countries, in many parts of the world, did not get into the labor force in a significant way in the second industrial revolution. The third industrial revolution was the beginning of digitalization, the one that came with globalization. That industrial revolution saw more women entering the labor force, but highly exploited. This is the industrial revolution that created the globalization, which now is creating many problems for us. But it also showed how much the world can be connected. It made the world smaller. It made you as young women and women in general to be visible to each other. It was also good for global solidarity of women, for the sisterhood of women around the world, the sisterhood of women on this continent, something that you still have to hold on to. But now we are in a new era of the fourth industrial revolution that comes with artificial intelligence and the changes that will mean that everything you do is open to anyone, because as you run your education, your workplace, your personal life, all of these will be connected. And anyone who does not understand the fourth industrial revolution will be left behind. So you are the generation in the world, the first generation that will be living in a world that has changed. There is consensus about where Africa will be in that. And this is something that I would like you to discuss and to see how you can take this to every part of the world, how we can teach many of our young people, of our communities, to master technology so that they too can be in the Industrial Revolution. There are 3 areas in which women are being left behind in technology. Firstly, human resource. Most women are not educated for this Industrial Revolution. Secondly, it's access to gadgets. Many women do not have access to gadgets, and there's a lot of discrimination when it comes to access to gadgets. And thirdly, in the private sector, where a lot of developments and the influencing of the industry happening, women are not highly represented at the most important places. So we need to be fighting for representation of women everywhere. So I have left you with many problems that I am saying you need to be concerned about, you need to be thinking about, you need to influence. But I think you are the generation working together with the generation before you who need to come forward and to be the influencers of the future we all want, the future in which we will achieve the best we can in SDGs, and the future that will take us to Agenda 2063 with a vision that we hoped Agenda 2063 will bring to Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Phumzile. I'm not really going to do the summary because we are now opening the conversation. I'm sure fellows are keen to ask questions, to contribute, to open the conversation with you. So I will pass the floor to one of the fellows, Ayak, because Ayak is one of the 38 fellows, and she's from South Sudan. She's posted in Djibouti, and she has celebrated her birthday yesterday. That is the reason why she was chosen. So over to you.
Thank you, Odette. Thank you so much, Dr. Phumzile, for your insightful presentation. So some of my sisters here, we have some questions for you. So I'll just be walking around and asking what kinds of questions we have, but I'll start with myself because I have a question for you. So yesterday we did an exercise where we talked about what it means to be a young African leader. So I would propose the same question to you. So I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on what it means to be an African woman leader. So that's the first question. Does anyone else have any questions, comments, or reflections? Veronica?
Thank you so much for all your insights. A quick question will be, what challenges have you faced as a woman leader, and how have you managed to overcome the challenges throughout your career?
Grace?
Thank you very much. You talked about, my name is Grace and I'm from Ghana. I'm currently stationed in the UNDP office in Rwanda. You talked about how we need to reflect on globalization and the fact that Africa does not need to be exploited. And my question is, after the COVID-19 and also currently what is going on with the Russia-Ukraine war, we see African countries go back to IMF for bailouts. How do we actually position ourselves so well as we still go back to them for bailouts years after years? How do we do that and also make sure that we are really doing well with our productivity and all that? Also, my second question has to do with the fact that a couple of days ago, the IMF gave us an economic global outlook that the West is yet to come in the year 2023. And Africa is a continent that has actually suffered the repercussions of these things that are happening globally, especially with the 2008 crisis, COVID-19, this Russia and Ukraine war. How can we as African and also young African women leaders contribute to making sure that we do not have more effects? Thank you very much.
So maybe we can take one more question.
Hi, my name is Makda. I'm stationed in New York. I'm actually working for the gender team under BPPS. One thing that I've realized, and also you've touched upon at the last point, women in leadership. Currently, women are underrepresented at all levels of decision making, and you've also touched upon knowledge on technology. How do we intertwine that? Because we're underrepresented at all levels. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll pass it back to you, Dr. Phumzile, for your responses.
Okay. Thank you very much for the questions. I mean, what does it mean to be an African young leader? I think an African young leader has to be bold, because nothing is easy in Africa. And a young African woman leader has to be concerned with those who are being left behind. And when I say concern, I mean actively concerned. It is not acceptable for a young person who may be in a good situation, who may be in an economically secured position, not to be concerned about those who do not have. Can I extend, sorry, my... So it is important for a young woman to always keep a very clear connection with those who are under threat of being left behind. But most important as well, a young African woman leader must be open to be learning all the time. The world is changing in a drastic way. If you tell yourself that you have arrived and you are settled, you definitely will not be in a position to cope for the future. For a young African woman has to be hungry for knowledge and has to be constantly upgrading themselves, because many of us will depend on you to interpret to us the changes that are happening in front of us. So as a young woman, this is not any time to think you have arrived. This is not the time to rest as well. You have to be constantly learning and constantly understanding the changes that you are living with. And what are the challenges you face as a leader? I think it's important that as a young woman leader, you tell yourself that nothing is too small or too big. There shouldn't be an area that is a no-go zone for you. You have to tell yourself that you are good enough to be engaged, to be a person who represents other young persons everywhere. And importantly, whenever you are in a space where decisions are being taken, never remain quiet. If you are in a decision-making space and people are deliberating and making decisions, and you keep quiet, that is equal to you accepting to be nullified. Nobody will actually understand that you were there, you were part of the process, not unless you make your mark. And of course, you should not have a blah blah. Whenever you contribute, you should talk substantively. which means you therefore should always prepare yourself. You should read, you should ask questions before, so by the time you get into the meeting, you know exactly what is the nature of the engagement there, so that you can be on top of the discussions as much as possible. Quietness never brought you anything. Quiet girls are not girls that will make the world better. At the very least, they are the most boring girls. So learn to be heard. Learn to make your points heard. Occupy the space so that people never forget that you were there and that you had something to say. Africa and the IMF, unfortunately, it's very difficult for us to expect big changes for Africa at this time. We are tied up with the IMF in many ways because we have so many challenges that we will not be able to deal with by ourselves. Many African countries are heavily indebted. So you cannot run away from that. Many African countries are not producing enough, which is the reason why we really have to be thinking about how globalization deindustrialized Africa, how we need to rebuild our countries. It's not going to take a short time. It's going to take a long time before we can get back to being in a situation where we can make our choices as far as IMF and the World Bank is concerned. So unfortunately, I really don't have good news for us as far as that is concerned. And of course, we need good leadership that is clear about the fact that we are trying to get ourselves out of the dependency on these multilateral institutions. And whether we will have that leadership in our countries, I don't know. From where I'm sitting, I am just seeing horrible leadership all around the world and all around Africa. I don't see any leadership that is really clear and focused on taking us out of this situation. So the challenge for you when you get into the leadership is that you see if you can give us a different path. Right now, I just think that our path is definitely going the wrong way in Africa and in the world. What was the last question? How do we change? Can somebody remind me the last question?
I asked about how women are underrepresented in decision-making roles, yes, and how we interact with the digital era.
Yeah, yes. I actually think that it is still a valid thing to call for special measures to secure women's leadership in every area. What we have noticed, certainly in governments and in politics, countries that have made progress about representation of women have taken special measures, and they have accompanied those measures which have put women in decision-making position. Countries that do not have any objectives do not make the kind of progress that we expect them to make. So I think something that, be it at the CSW globally, be it at the AU, you have to continuously call for, it is to secure a space for women, and then to ensure that there's the training of women across the board in ages who will be represented and who will take these positions. The AU already has got some goals for representation of women, which are not always fulfilled. I think the African Women's Leadership Network has also been concerned about that and about making sure that we push for women's leadership. So I think there is a room for women of all ages, all sectors, all countries to push together to make sure that we ensure that there's representation of women. And of course, in the different countries, to make sure that governments make the laws that will make inclusion of women and men compulsory, so that there shouldn't be a leadership position where a man or woman is underrepresented.
Thank you so much, Dr. Phumzile, for those responses. I think we have, there's one question that was not answered. Do you mind repeating it, Veronica?
Yes, the question was specific to you. What challenges you faced and how you overcame them?
Oh, yes, thank you, sir. Yes. You know, I took on leadership out before I was even in the politics of South Africa. I was already working internationally, and I was working in particular on advancement of young women. And from that time onwards, I made it my point not to allow anyone to stand in front of me. In a generic way, I have seen how much there has been low expectations from women, where you get into positions where people just don't expect you to perform. What I have done is to sort of do the first attack. In any position, I am the one who attacks first. And I think that has helped me not to be a victim of domination and of men. And what do I mean by first attack? In whatever position that you are in, you have to be so well prepared. And you have to make sure, without arrogance and so on, but you have to find a very smart way of making sure that everybody knows that you know what you are about, and that you will not accept anyone who reduces your place and your leadership. Very tiring, I must confess, because you have to be on your wits all the time. But for my generation, that was the one way in which we could fend off any discrimination. And of course, it's always important to have a point. I don't think that we are past that era. You still have to continuously make your presence felt and heard. And for me, throughout my life, whenever I had a leadership or non-leadership role, I always made sure that I make my presence felt. And I think that is what helped me not to experience the discrimination that comes with patriarchy that we all live under. And also be very bold to speak on behalf of those that are discriminated. Never allow any discrimination to go past. And make sure that you always are raising at any time when there's an injustice, you raise the issue. You know, have no time to laugh at racist jokes, at sexist jokes. Make people uncomfortable about flaunting their racism and sexism. It is only when you repeat these things that the people who behave in that faction, in that manner, will be aware of their discriminatory practices. It's also important that you call for measures that raise the issue of discrimination. so that people are aware that you are constantly noting that you have power, use it. The worst thing you can ever do as any woman is to have authority where you don't use it. Don't use it with arrogance. Don't oppress other people. Be fair, be rational, but whatever you do, make sure that your power is felt. That for me has always been very important. So that disarms the people that are ready to discriminate against you, because you have an attitude that says, I'm here and I'm in charge.
Thank you so much for that. I think we have time for just one or two more questions.
Thank you, Doctor, for your intervention. I wanted to ask how to help rural women to access the market, particularly in the African free trade area.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, we can turn it to you for your response to that.
Okay. There's a lot of work that is being done to make sure that the Africa market is accessible to women. There's actually particular interventions that are meant to make access possible. I think it is important that in your country, you find out who are the people who are driving that program. But even without that help that you can get from the people who are running that program, I would recommend that you look online, depending, of course, what it is that you want to trade in. But there's a lot of opportunities to kickstart and in some cases to sustain your trading by the use of technological platforms that are being set up for trade. I think conferences like this are important for you to connect with other women of other countries and find out what the situation is in those countries. UN Women is also an organization that helps and supports women as economic empowerment. They too can be of assistance to you.
Thank you. I think that wraps up our question and answer period. On behalf of my sisters, we just want to thank you so much for spending time with us this morning. We really appreciate your reflections. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Aya. And thank you very, very much, Dr. Phumzile. We really appreciate the comprehensive presentation, the comprehensive answers from your experience, from your knowledge and skills. We really do appreciate. I think fellows, you heard, you need to keep the connection with those who are at risk of being left behind. That is very important. Consistently learning and understand the change that is happening so that you can be able to act on those. Be on the top of the discussions. That is very, very important. Learn to occupy the space. To be heard, the leadership can help us to get out of the dependency, of course, imposed by those institutions. And we need to be careful. Thank you for your own experience. And of course, on the question about the CFTA, just to let you know that UNDP and UN Women have just published a report on the consultation on women in trade, of course. And I think we would be happy to share the copy whenever you want. Thank you very much and have a good day. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think she's going to go offline, right? Okay, we have a choice to make, everybody. As you know, time has not been on our side. So our choice right now is, do we want to do this session where we define leadership? So many different options. Option A, we continue fish bowling and we do a little bit of debating, okay? Option B would be to sit at our tables in groups. Hopefully everybody else will join us. But what I was thinking was you could also just like, let's take our time, Google, what is a leader? Look for different things, come together and kind of make a definition that you all, at least at your table, can agree on. Okay, that's option B. Option C is right now we're scheduled to do a session on self-care and collective care, okay, which we do have. That session was so it's prepared. We're not attached to any of these ideas, by the way. We will do what you guys want to do. The session was for us to just share some of our good practices, best practices on different kind of self-care and collective care, taking care of each other, taking care of ourselves, avoiding burnout, all these things we want to talk about in the workplace. Okay, so option A was we continue to fishbowl and we debate those leaders' discussions. Okay, so if you would like option A, put up your hand. Okay, option B, what is a leader? Option C, self-care. Okay, there we go. All right, coolies. So how about we do, we would love to get you guys just interact on the what is a leader thing. The reason is because leadership development is the reason why we're here, right? So we need to crack this. I would love it. We will send out some questions on the app, okay? And maybe like over lunch, over the rest of the day, let's just put in there what we feel our definitions are so that at least tomorrow I can summarize. Does that work? Okay, right, so let's talk about care. Yay. I think you guys can stay where you are, no need to move, yeah.